By the end of 2016, almost everyone in Formula One had reached the same conclusion. Max Verstappen was the problem. One man believed Formula One was the problem. Sebastian Vettel was screaming into the radio at Spa. Kimi Räikkönen, a driver famous for staying quiet, could not stay quiet anymore. Charlie Whiting called the 18-year-old boy into the steward's office. Every headline told the same story. This kid is going to hurt someone. This kid needs to be stopped. But in a quiet corner of the paddock, an old man in a red cap sat watching the same races. His face still carried scars from a fire that had almost killed him 40 years earlier. He was not angry. He was not writing this boy off. He was watching for something else. The only man in Formula One who had actually died at the wheel was not looking at mistakes. He was looking for something almost nobody else could see. And for 3 years, he tried to tell everyone what it was. Almost nobody listened. To understand why Niki Lauda saw Max differently, you have to understand what Niki Lauda had already survived. August 1st, 1976. Nürburgring Nordschleife. His Ferrari caught fire at over 200 kilometers per hour. He was trapped inside a burning cockpit for 43 seconds. His lungs were scorched. His face was destroyed. In the hospital that night, a priest gave him the last rites. 6 weeks later, he was on the grid at Monza. Blood was still weeping from under his balaclava. He finished 4th. He was not there for glory. He was there because he needed to know if he could still do it. Most drivers never touch that line. They imagine it. They fear it. They talk about it in interviews. Niki Lauda had crossed it and come back. And that gave him something no other voice in the paddock had. He could tell the difference between a boy who was dancing near the fire because he did not understand it, and a boy who was dancing near the fire because he understood it better than the men watching him. That is a distinction almost impossible to explain in words. But if you have burned inside a car and lived, you can see it instantly. You recognize it. Because you have been that boy yourself. 40 years after Nürburgring, that boy showed up in a Red Bull. And every world champion in the paddock started saying the same thing about him. Except one. By the middle of 2016, 3 institutions of Formula One had reached the same verdict about Max Verstappen. The first was the drivers. Spa, Belgian Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, on the radio, furious. That is what he does. It is dangerous. And it was not only Vettel. Kimi Räikkönen, a driver famous across 2 decades for saying almost nothing about his rivals, said Max was changing direction too late in braking zones. When Kimi speaks about another driver, the paddock knows something has broken. 2 world champions, not exchanging opinions, forming a chorus. The second institution was the FIA. Charlie Whiting, the race director, summoned Verstappen to the steward's office after Spa. He held a formal meeting with the drivers to discuss defensive driving in braking zones. And then the FIA did something they rarely do for one driver. They changed the rule book. The regulation banning drivers from moving under braking became known across the paddock by a single nickname, the Verstappen rule. This was no longer a media argument. This was a governing body writing law around one 19-year-old boy. The third institution was the press. Autosport, Bild, La Gazzetta dello Sport. Every major motorsport publication used the same 3 words in the same 6 months. Aggressive, dangerous, immature. La Repubblica, in Italy, went further. They described the entire Red Bull Young Driver program as a form of carnage. Not competition. Carnage. The drivers spoke. The governing body spoke. The press spoke. 3 institutions. 1 verdict. This 19-year-old had a problem, and Formula One was going to fix it before he hurt someone. And then, from the Mercedes garage, one voice refused to join the chorus. He was not smiling. He was not defending Max either. He was just watching. That voice belonged to Niki Lauda, and what he said next confused everyone. Right after Spa, Lauda spoke on Italian television. He did not soften his words. He said, Max belongs back in school. He said Max needs a psychiatrist. The world nodded. Even the fairest voice in Formula One had turned against the boy. Case closed. Except the case was not closed. In the same interview, Lauda continued, "I think Max has an incredible talent, but there is a limit to what you can and cannot do on the track, and someone needs to point it out to him." A week later, he said it more clearly. If we do a balance between talent and youth, then his talent wins. The paddock did not know what to do with this. Was he attacking Max or defending him? He was doing neither. He was doing something almost nobody else in Formula One was willing to do at all. He was measuring the boy. And the pattern held for years. Baku, 2018. The two Red Bulls crashed into each other. Lauda publicly said Max carried the greater share of the blame. China, that same year. Verstappen collided with Vettel. Lauda said it was completely Max's fault. He added, "When you compete in more races, you should get more clever. But he is going the other way. He needs to sort himself out. Nobody can help him. Those are not the words of a man protecting a favorite. Those are the words of a judge." And that distinction between defending and measuring was the thing nobody else was doing. Everyone was busy declaring a verdict. Lauda was busy separating what the boy did from what the boy was. There is one quality in racing that every legendary driver has, and every average driver lacks. It cannot be coached. It cannot be trained. It cannot even be fully explained. Adrian Newey has spent 40 years trying to name it. Sometimes he calls it feel. Sometimes instinct. Sometimes just the thing. Niki Lauda had this thing. It kept him alive on August the 1st, 1976, when it should not have. He knew what it looked like from the inside, which meant he could recognize it from the outside, faster than anybody. Now watch what he saw. May the 15th, 2016. Barcelona. First race in a Red Bull. 6 months after his 18th birthday. Behind him, Kimi Räikkönen, in a faster Ferrari with DRS, for 66 laps. Martin Brundle wrote something in his post-race column that most people missed. He wrote that Verstappen had worked out that every time Räikkönen closed up into turn 1, using slipstream and DRS, the Ferrari would then spend the next lap charging its batteries in preparation for another attempt. So on the alternate laps, Verstappen would protect his tires in anticipation of the next onslaught. Brundle finished with one line. "Such a calm maturity. It simply doesn't seem possible at 18. That is not aggression. That is not youth. That is calculation." Then, in the paddock, Niki Lauda took his cap off. "I have no answer except to take my cap off. What we are seeing is a talent of the century. Coming from a man who had raced against Prost, Andretti, and Hunt, this was not admiration. This was diagnosis." And Helmut Marko, from the opposite garage, said the same thing in different words. The way he kept the lead with someone like Räikkönen harrying him is incredible. Two men in enemy garages, both spotting the same specific thing. Not speed, pressure absorption. Lauda had not said Max was fast. Everybody knew Max was fast. Lauda had said that Max had the thing you cannot teach. And Lauda, better than any man alive, knew what that thing looked like. What happened after Barcelona was not vindication. It was translation. Brazil. November 2016. Rain. The Verstappen save at 300 kilometers per hour at turn 1. Years later, Martin Brundle described that moment to Rachel Brooks in a single sentence. Brazil 2016. He went full Tokyo drift through the final corner, caught the slide like it was nothing, and still looked bored. Toto Wolff, after the race, called it simply the Verstappen show. Lauda had already said this in Barcelona 6 months earlier. Brazil was history translating him from Austrian into English. Then Monaco, 2018. The disaster. Max crashes in the final practice session. Starts last. Recovers to 7th. The paddock declared he had learned nothing. Lauda stayed quiet. Because he had never said Max would stop crashing. He had said Max had the thing you cannot teach. Crashing is a thing you can teach out of a driver. Instinct is not something you can teach into one. Austria, 2019. Max wins from behind. Overtakes Leclerc late for the victory. Disciplined. Surgical. No mistake. The paddock called this Maturity. Niki Lauda would have called it a Sunday afternoon. He had told them, 3 years earlier, that this driver was already there. What had changed was not Max. What had changed was that the stopwatch had finally caught up to what he had already seen. Years later, Adrian Newey, the man whose cars would carry Max to 4 world titles, tried to describe what made him different. Not speed, feel, adaptability, the ability to find grip where none exists. Newey needed years to articulate what Lauda had said in one sentence in 2016, with a cap in his hand. Lauda did not need history to prove him right. He did not need Max to win a championship. He needed Formula One to understand what he had understood in Barcelona. History did not confirm his judgment. History very slowly explained it. May the 20th, 2019. Niki Lauda died in his sleep. 70 years old. The paddock broke. Lewis Hamilton wept openly on camera. Toto Wolff could not finish a sentence. A red cap was placed on every Mercedes at the next race. 2.5 years later, Max Verstappen won his first world championship. Abu Dhabi, last corner, last lap, turn 5, against Lewis Hamilton. The kind of ending Niki Lauda would have loved. He was not there to see it. And now, at the end of this story, we can finally understand what he had been trying to say. Niki Lauda never warned us that Max would win a championship. He never warned us that Max would dominate the sport. He never even warned us that Max would stop crashing. He warned us that Formula One was watching a boy and missing the driver. He warned us that we had confused youth with recklessness and speed with talent. He warned us that we were so busy judging the mistakes, we had stopped looking for the thing you cannot teach. The paddock heard him. The FIA heard him. The press heard him. But hearing is not understanding. And by the time Formula One understood, the man who had said it was already gone. The only man in Formula One who had truly died at the wheel spent his final years trying to change how Formula One judges a young talent. Nobody listened. And somewhere on the grid tonight, another Verstappen is being told he drives too aggressively.